On this episode,
what's the next level of that? Is now people are getting into sports betting because now it's popular.
I think whenever there's money involved, you're going to have people that are either greedy.
Do you think this ever is exposed down to the core? And they are able to predict games down to like within a point.
Right, I was watching it anyway.
What was the point? What was the point
because
of trying to bet?
Now I'm personally invested.
Now
I have
invested.
A real reason to watch that game, right?
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Tired of dragging around that clunky old grill to every tailgate or campsite? Hitchfire has your back. Literally. Their rugged hitch-mounted grills are built for adventure. Just swing it out, fire it up, and get cooking anywhere your vehicle takes you. And I've got a code to hook you up. Use SFXDOTCOM at checkout to save 10% off your entire order. Head to hitchfire.com and upgrade your outdoor game. Hitchfire, built to burn wherever you roam. Crowd roars, the lights burn bright, and millions of dollars ride on a single play. The quarterback drops back, the referee's whistle echoes through the stadium, and somewhere in the shadows, someone already knows how this game will end. For as long as there have been games, there have been gamblers. But when the line between competition and corruption blurs, the sport itself becomes a stage for deception, where the house just doesn't win, it writes the script. From locker rooms to Las Vegas, from backroom deals to billion-dollar betting apps, the game behind the game has always been about one thing: control. Because when the stakes get high enough, players aren't the only ones who can be bought. And when the referees, the supposed guardians of fairness, start making calls that defy logic, you have to wonder, is it just bad officiating? Or is someone somewhere cashing in on your belief that the game is still fair? Tonight, we're diving into the underworld of sports gambling, rigged games, and corrupted officials. Because what if the greatest moments in sports history weren't spontaneous at all? Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you are tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick, here with, you know what? I didn't even prepare a good one for you, Mr. Phillips. I wanted to say something, the guru of gambling.
There you go, we'll go with that.
Gosh. Mr. Phillips, we are your conspiracy realists here for another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Really?
What's up there, Tata Magatas?
I'm going hard in here. One other thing I forgot when I hit the bar before I walked over here was I forgot to hit this with a little bit of grenadine to really give me the sunrise effect.
Ooh.
But I'm not going to do that now because it'll leave you all in boredom, and it's really not that impactful on the flavor of my drink.
No. And YouTube doesn't want us to really talk about it anyway, so we'll move on.
That is very true. They slap us with the limited tag no matter what we do, no matter how clean we are, but we'll do our best to make each and every one of you happy and to keep delivering this content for each of you. Tonight we're talking about something that's kind of been plaguing the news quite a bit, Mr. Phillips. It started with the NBA, right? And the NBA was really the first one to, in modern era, the first one to really come out.
In terms of right now, yes.
Yeah, and then it kind of parlayed over into Major League Baseball just as we're recording this a couple days ago. So who knows, by the time you all see this off our YouTube channel, which is a great opportunity to like and subscribe there, or listen to us over on Spotify where you can follow us on there, how many more cases will have come out. But my inclination is that they'll start to kind of drip out of here sports gambling. It's taken over the world by storm in many different facets. And the question, and I think part of the reason that sports gambling hasn't really been around at all, or really as popular for a long time, it was always so legal in so many places, was because the idea that you could fix games. And we'll get into that a little bit here. But what's really the first exposure that you had to the world of sports gambling?
I mean, you grow up knowing about sports gambling. I never, bet on sports as a kid. If I really wanted to find a way, I'm sure I could have.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really start. Really, you actually started before me because you used to use some shady websites.
Some
I
shady
didn't start
websites, yeah.
until it became legal, until the apps were out, the DraftKings, the
Wow.
FanDuels, all that. That's really when I started actually sports betting. Yeah,
So you were super modern era. Yeah. So
yeah.
I actually, believe it or not, I actually knew somebody who knew a bookie. And so we would throw down, a couple bucks here and there on like Giants games or things like that. I never really got deep into it. And I, once I started finding some of those shady websites, I got involved with a couple of them to throw some, a couple bucks here and there down. I started getting into the parlays a little bit, but my debit cards at the time would get locked because
Yeah.
because it wasn't legal. So you had to use a credit card, or you had to like circumvent it using PayPal or something like that. And then credit cards starting to locking it down. So I just kind of abandoned it. But I
It was
remember
all
like even,
overseas, right?
well, yeah, I mean the base of the websites were always overseas. So like
Yeah.
this is an era really before crypto became popular too, which is now funding a lot of the, if gambling is illegal in your state, people are using applications like that to do that. But I remember even like being in tune with it because games that we would play, I would hold lines for in-game currency, and I'd literally go on these websites. I'd get the sports lines, and people that were into sports would bet in-game currency on whatever the sports was. And my thing in these games, how I created like a stream of revenue or resource, was by kind of managing these lines, which really had I didn't know anything about it. But that's actually how I taught myself kind of a little bit about it. Sports betting becomes legalized in our state here just a couple of years ago, but I think the big exposure to me was really fantasy football. And I know not a lot of people kind of classify it as betting necessarily, but I think for all intents and purposes, that's what it is, right? Like you're throwing some money into a pot, you're picking a bunch of people, you're kind of maneuvering your way through the end of the season to win money. At what point
Yeah,
do
it's
you
long-term
start?
gambling.
It's long-term gambling, right? You've
Right.
been in more fantasy sports than football, right? How long have you been doing that?
Well, I mean, our fantasy league's been around for, what is this, our 16th year, right?
17,
I
yeah.
believe this is year 16. 17, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Before that, I did fantasy baseball, before I got into football, because baseball is really my first love. So, I don't know, we'll call it 20 years, probably.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and I guess we'll get into this a little bit later, so I won't kind of broach it there. But I think the popularity of fantasy football or fantasy sports in general really led to like these daily fantasy leagues that started popping up, which sort of skirted the line a little bit. I remember when they first popped up, you
Hmm.
could do whatever you want on them, and then all of a sudden like the regulations started, and like you had to be like in certain locations, like like even just to log into DraftKings, like if you logged in too close to the border of a certain state, like you couldn't get into
Dude,
them.
I made that mistake when I used to travel for work.
Hmm.
I I had oh my God, I can't think of the word right now. A VPN on my phone, right? And I was in PA, and at that point, sports betting wasn't legal in PA. So it was like a Monday night I was out there, and I'm like, shit, I didn't throw any money on the game, right? And when you're traveling for work, you by yourself, you're sitting at the bar. I want to be a little bit more invested in the game, so I'm like, God damn it! So I flipped the VPN on. I go to try to make a bet. Boom! They just scorched my account. I was like, oh God damn it! So I've
Yep.
I've burnt myself trying to do that many
That's
moons
it.
ago.
That's it. It really from there, as those daily leagues take off, explode, and all of a sudden it's just you can get access everywhere you go. I mean, every app at this point has some sort of betting in it. I mean, even the Yahoo app, you can bet on lines now, which is
Yeah.
absolutely absurd to think about. But here we are, and here's what's happening. And as I think the natural ramification of that, the natural next step of what comes is the question of, are people starting to fix the games? I think you see that a lot in like movies, TV shows. You see it a lot in like small leagues or something. People can kind of manipulate it. And when you look at something on scale, right, you don't think that it could happen because, oh, well, you've got cameras everywhere, you've got officials, there's too many people, all these people already making millions of dollars. But these cases that now come out all of a sudden kind of spoil the beans on that a little bit. I don't know too much about the NBA players that were really involved. I know there's some ties to LeBron, but we could talk about the MLB case a little bit because you're pretty up to tune about everything going on in baseball. Who are these guys
Yeah.
that end up getting busted?
So you've got Emmanuel Clase, who is widely regarded as one of the best relievers in all of Major League Baseball for the Guardians. And I don't know why I'm blanking on the other name off the top of my head. I'll look up in a second. But this I shouldn't say just came out, right? They were suspended from Major League Baseball during the 2025 season. There was accusations about them being involved in sports gambling and about them potentially altering games, for payouts. It just came out. I think it was like 2 or 3 days ago. We're in November 2025 here, and both players, and I'll look up who the other one was. I don't know why it's escaping me right now, but both players were actually indicted, and they're being charged with sports betting and altering games. They didn't necessarily throw the game. They were props, right? So if you guys bet, you could bet on player props. Depending upon which sport book you use, you could bet on anything from your typical game lines to, hey, is the next pitch going to be a ball or a strike? If you're a real degenerate, you could go that deep, and that's what they were doing. So they were taking payouts and they were throwing balls intentionally in specific instances, and then taking that payout. What's wild about it, from an outside perspective, and granted, we still don't know a lot about the case yet, but the payouts were minimal. I'm talking like 7 grand. Some said it could have been up to 12 grand. We're talking about peanuts for most regular day Americans, let alone professional baseball players.
Right.
Where it gets tricky is how many times did they do it? We don't know. But that's the current case. I mean, look, MLB has been plagued with sports betting from literally 1919, and we can go into the Black Sox case. Pete Rose, Shohei Ohtani, and his interpreter a few years ago, and now this comes out with Emmanuel Clase. But yeah, it's rearing its ugly head again, my friend. It's rearing its ugly head.
I want to bring back up the payouts that you brought up there because that's kind of been a big topic of conversation, even on socials. People are like wrecking them about that. Sorry, as I adjust my light here. They're wrecking them about that. Like, oh, why would you throw away your career for 7, 10, 12, whatever? It doesn't really make a difference. I don't think that that's the case. I think that is, in all likelihood, one particular payout that
Right.
maybe got busted, and that's what the FBI or the league or whoever ends up discovering this case, or it ends up being able to kind of pin on them for sure and stop them. It's like anything else, right? Like you take somebody down for a drug bust, you take down a crime boss back in the day. You don't need to get them on everything. Those crime
Right.
bosses, those mob
It's
bosses
like a
are putting
RICO
people in
case.
the ground. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's also a way to bring those guys in and get them to say, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to admit to doing all this stuff," or they're going to the authorities will say, "Hey, we know you did all this stuff. Who else is involved?" And try to get some other of those players.
It has to be. It has to be because Luis
It's gotta
Ortiz
be.
was the other pitcher, and just taking a look at the numbers here, right? Luis Ortiz, and again, this is in the indictment, right? Um, he was given 5 grand. Emmanuel Clase was given 7 grand. Luis Ortiz's salary for 2025 alone. Okay, now granted, he's a much lower threshold reliever, 782 grand. Emmanuel Clase, 4.9 million. So, to your point, these guys had to have been doing this
There's something
hundreds of
else.
times that
Yeah.
we just don't know about. There's something deeper involved. Why would you jeopardize your salary for quite
Right.
literally? I mean, in Emmanuel Clase's perspective, you're talking about like less than 1% of his salary.
Right.
So it has to be much deeper than this. It has to.
And I think one of the things that's kind of going overlooked too is that what's stopping them from being the ones that can place the wager on what they're doing as well. if you're using
Hell yeah.
US legal betting apps, sure, there's protections in place. But what did we talk about at the top? That wasn't a mistake. There are plenty of ways that you can go about placing wagers, whether it's through a bookie, whether it's through another service that's overseas, whether it's through a friend, a family, or a proxy too. So my inclination is that there's a lot more money at stake here. Otherwise, why would you jeopardize, a $4 or $5 million salary on a $5,000 payout? Just doesn't make a lot of sense.
And that is the big controversy. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's the big
No, it's
controversy
fine.
in the Shohei Ohtani case. So Shohei Ohtani, just a brief overview. I think this was 2 seasons ago. His interpreter, right? Shohei comes from Japan. He speaks Japanese, doesn't speak English. He has an interpreter. His interpreter was busted using not a regulated legal sports betting.
Right.
Was busted for, I mean, literally hundreds of millions of dollars in sports betting that he allegedly, quote unquote, stole from Shohei's bank account, right? I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Seems a little
We'll get
fishy
into
for
it.
sure. Well, it's obviously not the first case, and this isn't a history channel, so we won't dive into all of them. But one that was kind of notable to me that jumped out since we're on the topic of baseball is Pete Rose. And he was actually taken out, I guess, of the Baseball Hall of Fame because he gets ended up busted, or I guess maybe he had a Hall of Fame
He was never
career.
inducted.
He was never inducted,
Correct.
right? He basically gets cast out of Major League Baseball
He was
because of
Banned for life.
right, because of all this wagering that's going on, betting. On
And
those
you're
games. And now
talking
seeing
about
it
a
happening.
surefire first ballot Hall of
Hall of
Famer.
Famer, right?
I mean, literally, his nickname is the Hit King. He was the Hit King. He was actually, I don't want to say, I mean, for lack of a better term, forgiven by MLB. And there's talks of him eventually going into the Hall. He did recently pass away, and literally, I mean, I kid you not, like 5 days after he passed away, MLB makes this announcement that they're
Yeah.
going to forgive Pete Rose and blah blah blah,
course,
and so on
yeah,
and so
yeah.
forth. But that was probably in terms of Major League Baseball, that was the biggest sports betting scandal that ever occurred in modern era. Not talking about the Black Sox, which was, I mean, 8 players were involved in that. They threw the goddamn World Series.
Well, so why don't you bring that up? That's the 1919
The
scandal.
1919 Chicago White Sox, dubbed the Black Sox, they call that team the Black Sox because of this scandal. 8 players of that team quite literally threw away the goddamn World Series, the most important games you could ever play in. I mean, most baseball players never even sniff a World Series. These guys threw it away for a payout. Granted, it was a different time. We're talking.
Well, that's what I was
1919.
gonna say.
These
Yeah.
guys were farm hands. They were working at car dealerships. They were working at supermarkets in the off season. They were
Right.
butchers. Baseball didn't pay what it pays today, not even remotely close. So it makes more sense, not ethical, not moral. Wouldn't recommend doing it.
Right. The pay justifies the
yeah.
means a little bit there because I'm seeing like
Exactly.
the payouts were $5,000 to $20,000, which in 1919 that's probably let's call it like 200 grand, right? Factoring inflation, maybe even more than that. Maybe it's $2 million. That $20,000. You could buy a house at that time for $20,000, right? Outright. So
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean,
less.
you're right actually because I think in like the honestly I think in like the 70s 80s you could probably buy a house for $20,000. So even if you call that 200 grand, $2 million, whatever it might be, it's a lot of money for that time. So there's, and like you said, baseball really wasn't what it was. The World Series was, not to dismiss baseball. I know you love it, but it's a child's game now that they're playing professionally, kind of probably for fun. It's like doing like an adult rec league and you're winning the championship, but now it's a little more national than it was at that era. And that's for all sports leagues. They weren't what they were today. They weren't juggernauts.
Right.
at that
Nobody was making money playing sports back then.
Right. It's like you said, you have side jobs. You worked a full-time job and you did this basically for fun on the side because you enjoyed yourself, or maybe not side jobs, full-time careers. Where I want to pivot the conversation though is more modern era. Is we talked about basketball, we talk about baseball. Everybody always jokes nonstop about the NFL. The referees love Patrick Mahomes. The referees now love the Eagles. I mean, it's funny to watch now when the Eagles do the tush push. There was a video that came out from the Monday night game. I mean, 3 offensive linemen move forward into the pile before the ball is snapped. I'm not talking like flinch. I'm saying like they're a full 2 feet forward before the ball is snapped, and it's just straight up not even called anymore, even in replays. And it's not been for a while. You'll get in Chiefs games, the Chiefs will be down and they're just not connecting, and all of a sudden there's like a flag on this like little itsy bitsy hit, or somebody like brushes Mahomes' shoulder and you get a flag, and you'll watch the opposing quarterback get absolutely slaughtered on a play previous and get his head taken off by three guys on illegal hits and no flag is called. People often ask, how is it possible to fix games? And we started talking about this sort of jokingly in some of our sports groups. And I think the internet started talking about it sort of jokingly in a lot of sports groups. And as legal gambling becomes more prominent, I think that joking has kind of morphed into seriousness. There was a comment by Arian Foster maybe 3 years ago now, where he goes on some podcast. I don't remember what the podcast name is. Arian Foster, for those who don't know, is a very successful running back. In his era, in his prime, he was one of the best in the NFL. To be equated with LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson, like Arian Foster's in the same conversation as them in his prime. Shorter career, yeah. But he comes out and says that the NFL is scripted. Oh yeah, he's like they tell us what's going to happen, and they'll tell you what to do. I don't know, given the depth of the amount of people that are involved in the NFL, and quite honestly, sometimes the what's the right word I'm trying to think of right here, the extent of their knowledge. They're not all the brightest crayons in the box. A lot of these athletes have gotten there for their athletic. I mean, I'm a big New York Giants fan. We both are. Cam Scatterbo, wild running back. We joke that like he can have 50 yards of green grass in front of him. He chooses to turn and run into somebody that's 3 yards to the side because he'd prefer that. I think he'll be the first one to tell you, this guy is not somebody that's probably acing the SATs. He's out of his mind. And you have to be running into people for a living and enjoying it. So right. to try to expect, there's 52 there's 52, but then there's 90 people on the roster at some point. To try to expect all these people across 32 teams to really be in cohesion to script these games, not likely at all. It's so absurd to think that. However,
it's impossible.
However, Mr. Phillips, the idea of having an official that can throw a flag and change the course of a game, like, and I'm not saying like a drive, like a game dramatically. There's been so many instances that this has happened in major turning points of games that have shifted momentum of seasons or playoff potential or even conference championships. To do that, it doesn't take much. Do you think I'm out of my mind conspiracy here, or do you think there's something to that?
Dude, look. We would be foolish to say that it's not plausible, right? You'd be foolish to say that it's not plausible. So, I think you made a really good point. With the amount of players that are in the NFL, I feel very confident saying it is literally impossible to get all of them on the same page to essentially cheat and keep them quiet. It's never going to happen. But if you get one official, just one, that's all you need to get the job done. And at the end of the day, what is sports? It's entertainment. And what do they want? The most entertaining product on the field so that you, the viewer, will watch it and they get their ad revenue.
I want to hold that thought. I want to come back into that thought in a second, because before we get there, I want to talk about I want to keep talking about the officials. I think one of the defining aspects of that often goes overlooked as well is, as a coach, as a player, as anybody else, you are not allowed to criticize the officials. If they make a bad call, you cannot go on the podium after the game and call out an official for that. You cannot get in their face on the field about that. And those calls are generally not challengeable. Now, that's changed a little bit, and some of them are allowed to be challenged. But if they call like a pass interference or an illegal hit, those are not challengeable calls generally. That changes the game. And unless other officials have a clear line of sight and challenge that call and lift the flag up, which very rarely happens, will they question the authority of another official. It has to be buried. And every once in a while, you'll get the NFL that comes out, and I'm sure this happens in other sports. I'm only speaking to the NFL because I know about it a little bit more. But every once in a while, you'll have the NFL come out like a week later, like, oh, yeah, that's right. Like, that should have been a call, or it should not have been a call. Well, they don't change the outcome of the game. They just let
Right.
it goes by because it's all done. And
It
you
means
see
nothing
this,
at the end of the
it
day.
means absolutely nothing. And you see this, it's starting, it feels like it's starting to happen more frequently, but it strikes me as odd because most of these officials are no names, right? With the exception of the guy that gets on the hot mic. You don't know who they are, and you'll never really know who they are, and they're not allowed to be questioned or called out because then they get hit with huge fines, those people. And so it's like, why would you protect that? Why would you do that? And again, we'll tap into that in just a second here. But the plausibility to me to get in somebody's ear that's a line judge that can dramatically change the outcome of the game. I mean, it's cake, it's easy, it's no brainer. And you have to ask, Mr. Phillipson, what is the craziest thing about betting for you? You open up your sports, you open up any of your apps right now, right? You look down,
Mhm.
you want to put a 5-team parlay in there, right? You think you got it nailed, or you see like a nice spread, you're going to pick your team right there. What's the craziest thing about betting? I'm hoping I led you the right way here to give you the answer I
I
want.
have no idea where
Of
you're
course,
going with this.
I can
at
never
all,
lead this
in the
guy to
slightest
where I
bit.
want him to go. How accurate are those Vegas odds?
Dude, it seems like they nail them pretty damn good.
I mean, I am very well invested in technology. It's no stranger to anybody that's watched this show before. I'll be the first one to tell you to like and follow and subscribe. Wink, wink. But even we are in an era of AI right now, right? And this hasn't really existed to this degree. It's not really AI, it's machine learning. What you're doing is you're putting data in and it's predicting the data outcome. That's an important distinction here. This hasn't existed to this level for a very long time. But Vegas somehow, and Vegas isn't like, when you say Vegas, right? You're not talking about like this big conglomerate company. There's all these small companies, which I'm sure are probably using a lot of the same logic, but they are
Mhm.
somehow able to use these prediction models for decades, decades longer than machine learning AI has been prominent, right? I mean, you can't
I think
tell
we're
me that
talking a
they
century at this point.
maybe, right. And they are able to predict games down to like within a point. Like if the line is plus or minus 1 point, that game comes down to 1 point. And it's just like, how are you nailing this all the freaking time? It is statistically impossible to be that accurate that often in not just one line, but like when you go through player metrics, every line on that, like how do you know how that's going to be called? And of course, there's always anomalies that happen, and that's what keeps people sucked in with gambling. When you look
Right.
at casinos have been busted continuously on rigging games, right?
Yes.
The roulette table, it's got a weight to it, so it's going to hit certain things. The blackjack table, the cards, the deck could be loaded, or they're looking at screens underneath. The slots are just a joke. It's like the
I was gonna
crane
say
game at the
slots got to be the
boardwalk.
biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah. So if all of these other ways of making money have been proven to be rigged, why would we not think that these odds makers that are so damn accurate that they come down to a yard or a point every time, how is that possible? Answer that for me, Mr.
I don't
Phillips.
know. I don't know. I would love to know the quote unquote science behind it. I don't know.
There is
Maybe in
none.
another life. Maybe in another life I'll do a deep dive on this before we talk about it. I would love to know. But look, maybe there's somebody out there. Drop us a note in the comments. Shoot us an email. Let us know. But to the best of my knowledge, man, statistically speaking,
Mm-mm.
it's not
It's possible.
possible. You can't do it that accurately daily because it's not just the NFL, right? And
Right.
we're talking about
You're right.
NFL right now. We're talking about a few games a
Yeah.
week. There are sports games on 24/7, 365, and these odds makers are cooking the books for every single one of them.
Every one of them. And like, if you believe that the odds makers are just odds making, just because they've compiled all these analytics and they have all this data and so forth, that's fine. But what you are actually saying is that they are smarter than the wealthiest companies on the planet Earth, like OpenAI, Facebook, Google, Elon Musk, not his company necessarily, but Elon, well, Tesla, I guess Grok is derivative of really X, but you're saying that they have more access to high end technology than the wealthiest companies on the planet. which I guess is plausible, if there's government backing behind it, which I guess could be, but there's too much ineptitude in government for you to blame that. But I don't know. It seems like there's a whisper, and there's always that rogue flag that comes in, and there's always that one player who's been shorthanded and like bobbles an obvious catch. And I mean, again, like we go back to the NBA example, and like they're purposely missing throws. They're purposely screwing up a pass. And when you watch back some of the clips, you don't know if that's the actual play or not, but you can see it. Like that's an obvious one. It just
Dude,
makes you second guess all of it.
Yeah, Luis Ortiz and Emmanuel Clase are spiking fastballs 4 feet in front of home plate. Like it's
it's obvious.
Look, every once in a while does that happen? Sure. Is it super rare? Yeah, it's super rare. But I want to go back to one thing in regards to wealth. Do you know who's not super wealthy? Take one guess. Who's not super wealthy in terms of the NFL?
The referees.
The referees, right? Just like we talked about old-timey baseball players having, full-time jobs outside, and really more so in the off-season.
Right.
These guys have full-time jobs.
Yes.
Other than just being NFL officials. They're not millionaires. Look, I'm sure
Not
they're
always,
pretty well-to-do. I'm sure most of them are more wealthy than your average American. I'm not saying that these guys are hard up for cash. But these guys aren't making millions of dollars. So there's incentive there, right? There's monetary incentive for them to do something shady to bankroll a nice big fat payday.
Well, you threw me a perfect segue because I want to circle us back to something you talked about before. And your segue is monetary incentive. What would be the monetary incentive here on a grand scale? Let's think back to the people that get busted now. The guys in the MLB, the guys in the NBA, they're all nobodies for the most part. A couple people, there's been speculation of every once in a while you'll get like a big name guy that comes out, but like you're not getting any of the big time players. You're not seeing like a trickle effect of a dozen, hundreds of people or dozens of people. I bring people back to the steroid trials that happened in like the 90s when all of a sudden like this became a big thing. It was blowing up in all sports. I can really only speak to pro wrestling because I know that a lot better than anything else.
Well, it was huge in baseball.
Huge in baseball too. That came up quite a bit. And what ends up happening, right? Like they nail a couple people. I'll use the WWE for example because I know what's happening there. Steroid trials happen. They nail Vince McMahon. They're saying you're giving steroids to everybody. Blah 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 blah. I'm not giving him steroids. Blah 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 blah. All of a sudden they start introducing all of these like wellness tests and things like that. They start doing this in all these sports. They're doing these wellness tests. Nobody's doing steroids here. Everyone's all natural. If you truly believe that any athlete at any level of professional sports is not using performance enhancement drugs, you're an idiot. I mean, it's as simple as that. I'm not saying 99.98. I'm saying 100% of them all. If you are playing a professional sport, you have or are currently using performance enhancement drugs. Now, it may not be the steroids of old, of like the 70s and the 80s or the early 90s. Right. It is something else. And you're going to doctors that are performance enhancing you with things that you're not getting off the shelf. They're not being, you're not buying, you're not going to Acme. I'm not going to ShopRite and picking these up out of the supplement aisle. You're getting these from a doctor. You're getting it prescribed or you're getting it mixed up from you. You're ordering it online somewhere as a chemical thing, which is fine. Do your thing. You can't compete at that level because if you wanted to be clean and you wanted to do it the right way, you're now doing it with a bunch of other people that aren't. And you can't compare with them. Like you would not be able to do it. They will destroy you. And I'm not a medical expert, so I won't make this claim, but I know people that are very much into sports that have seen this progression, even in amateur sports going through college, and have said like what ends up happening is a lot of your soft tissue injuries are a result of this because your muscles blow up, but your body can't support all that. And that's why you see soft tissue injuries grow so much more. Now, what do? Is they jab more needles in it, and they rebuild it and whatnot. But they don't see that as big of a deal as what the injuries were years ago, where, you got this one injury and you're done for your career. Now you're seeing guys coming back. Like years ago, Mr. Phillips, you tore your ACL, your MCL, your career's over. We're not talking like hundreds of years ago. We're talking 20 years ago. Now these guys are coming back in 8 months and they're better. They're faster. Look at Derrick Henry at 40 years old. Look at Barkley, who's come back from 12.5 injuries. These guys are coming back like reconstructed. It's insanity. So the point I was trying to make, kind of bringing it all back, was that They nail a couple people. They say that they're working on it. They're fixing the problem. They know that everybody's doing it. It's more of a warning shot to tell the world we're fixing it. They don't want to fix the problem. Extrapolate that theory, that thought, apply it now to the sports betting. You nailed it before. Higher ratings, higher scoring games, more excitement. What does that create? It's not rhetorical. That was for you.
It's incentive. It's incentive. It's incentive.
It's monetary incentive. It's creating
100%.
more money. I want to connect a couple dots here for you. Well, not for you, for our audience here. Fantasy football takes off, right? It starts picking up. We got the Godfather, Peter, in our league, who's been doing fantasy football on pen and paper. They used to get newspapers and do it. It's not a new concept from the internet. It was there. They just moved it to the internet. All of a sudden, you've got these little leagues popping up on like Yahoo's. Yahoo's dead. Nobody uses Yahoo, but Yahoo Sports pops up with fantasy sports, and it resurrects this company. The company's only alive because they're fantasy sports. Then all of a sudden, you're seeing all that. And now all of a sudden, you've got NFL.com offers their fantasy league. ESPN's offering a fantasy league. MLB, like all of these major sports or television stations. CBS is offering them. Fox is offering them. Why? Because it's getting people interested in the sports, right? How many players from another, now you're a big baseball fan, so I don't even want to ask you that, but like, let's say the NFL again. How many players did you know outside of the Giants as you start to like football, or even maybe even outside of the Mets? How many players do you know from other teams at a given time?
Oh, I mean, 100%, right? I think that's a really valid point, right? Like, even as somebody, and now granted, I am like balls deep into baseball, and I'm huge into collecting, specifically cards, and so I could name you every top prospect from literally every team.
Prospect, though. You can name me every top prospect.
Correct. But point is, but and to your point, without the fantasy aspect, right? If you're a casual fan, you're just casually, even just a casual, or let's just say you're a diehard fan of your team, without the fantasy aspect, you're not going to know the depths of the, of the Texas Rangers organization. You're not going to know the depths of the Baltimore Orioles organization. It's because of fantasy sports that we all know that now.
I want to ask you, can you name 3 running backs on the Cleveland Browns right now?
Gee, why do you put me on the spot? I hate when you put me on the spot. Judkins.
Yep.
Now I'm blank.
I'll give you an easier one.
Me.
Give me 3 running backs on the Dallas Cowboys right now.
I don't like you putting me on spots. It drives me nuts.
God, he's trying to ruin my point, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just trying to make the point here. I'll name them. Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and Jaden Blue. I named you the 3rd string running back of the Dallas Cowboys. The Cleveland Browns, Jerome Henderson, Dylan Sampson. I mean, like these are guys that don't see the field, right? And somehow we know who they are. Like you recognize all of those names.
Oh, of course.
Right. Like I can name Byshell Tootin. Where is he from?
I couldn't say off the top of my head.
Jacksonville Jaguars. You guys get the idea. The point is that like you,
I really just I tanked that for you.
You tanked that whole segment for me, guys. The point is that like you're paying attention not just to the superstars anymore. You're paying attention to the little guys. What does that do? It creates television deals, right? Because now instead of like when we all grew up, we watched our local team. That's why sports fans have always been so regionalized. You couldn't watch teams across the world or across the country. Now, all of a sudden, you can watch everything. You've got Sunday Ticket. And like your average person, like you walk outside, you go to the bus stop, you talk to the people there. Everybody's got a sports team. Everybody. You go to work, everybody's in a fantasy league. In whether it's NBA, they're doing March Madness, whether they're doing fantasy baseball, whether they're doing fantasy football, everybody has a fantasy team. They're doing it with their kids, they're doing it with their work leagues. Everybody does it. People that know nothing about sports are doing it, and they're talking about these players and stuff like that they would have never heard of. They don't even know the players on their own team. They don't know the depth. They don't know the second stringers on their own team, but they know the 3rd string running back from a team across the country that's like 2-7 or 2-8, right? These leagues start to embrace these fantasy sports because it drives interest, which drives viewership, because now people want to watch all of these games. They have a reason to, and now they're interested. There's the Red Zone channel. There's all of a sudden the Sunday Ticket. There's buying the MLB package where you're getting all these different games that are going on all the time. What's the next level of that is now people are getting into sports betting because now it's popular. These sports betting companies, right? all of a sudden there's an official sports bet of each stadium. Like you go to a
Right.
stadium, they've got a table set up there where you could place bets if it's legal in your state. I mean, like, what are we doing? Like the enablement, but like you keep pushing the envelope because again, what did you say before? You're on a work trip. You're sitting at a bar by yourself watching a game. What did you want to do?
I was so pissed off I couldn't bet on that game. So pissed off I couldn't bet on that game.
But why
Granted, I
did
was
you want to
watching it
bet?
anyway.
What was the point? What was the point
Because
of you trying to bet?
now I'm personally invested.
Now you're
I have
invested.
a real reason to watch that game, right? I have a reason to watch every single snap instead of just passively watching it, right? As I maybe talk to somebody at the next table. I'm locked in, I'm focused. I want to watch. And what else am I watching? Every goddamn commercial.
It is not a coincidence that sports leagues, the popularity explodes in direct correlation with fantasy sports and sports betting. And you can test that theory by looking at the contracts that live sports get from television studios versus like TV shows. They'll churn out like bullshit drama. God, I can't say that. They'll churn out dramas all the time.
Mauricio.
Yeah, Mauricio, that's for you. They'll churn out dramas all the time because they're cheap and easy to do. But you're seeing that like regular television doesn't get views because you can watch that. People binge that stuff all the time now. That's why all these streaming networks popped up. But what drives you there to watch live is sports, right? So how do you keep people to watch sports? How do you get people to tune in when you want them to tune in, which lets advertisers now pay you more money? It's sports.
Exactly.
Which brings us out to the point you brought before.
Yeah.
How
I was gonna say,
do you make sports more exciting? Go ahead.
No. I was simply going to say the only reason why I even kept live television was for sports. It was the only thing that I used it for. I just got rid of Hulu like less than a year ago, and I was like, I'm paying $100 a month, literally only to watch sports. That is it. TV is dead. Traditional TV on network television is dead. It's all about sports. That's where the money is. Follow the money. You're going to find some wacky stuff.
And that's why you're seeing these streaming channels start pick up the live sports because they'll transition them right off. They all made they set up their streaming stations now. They're going to transition the live sports off of cable right into that. They'll create the same system we were in before. But now you see rule changes in all these leagues take effect. NHL has changed the rules so that the scores don't, so a game doesn't end 0-0 or 1-0 or 1-1. Can't even end in a tie anymore. The NFL has changed the rules. So if you even sneeze on the quarterback, which by the way, I probably would today, I'm sneezing like crazy over here. That's a flag. I mean, the defense is, you can see it in the stature, the build of these defenders, right? You used to look at guys like Ray Lewis or Lawrence Taylor. I mean, these are massive human beings. And now you're looking at the cornerbacks that are like, 6'5", like 110 pounds. Like there's these shrimps, these like, who is it? Not Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Forbes was like Washington. I mean, the guy was a toothpick. He looked like a toothpick running down the field. You don't need to be big anymore because you're not hitting anybody, because you hit him, you get a flag. Now it's all about shifting distance speed, and they changed the rules. Why? For bigger scoring games, right? You're seeing it in baseball, you're seeing it in hockey, you're seeing it in football, you're seeing it in all these sports. They want more excitement. Scoring, big plays, those are excitement. Well, you can only manufacture those rules so much until you take it away, right? Until you just completely change the game. And people aren't going to necessarily buy into that. They still like the hitting. They still like some of the excitement. There are people that still enjoy the defense. You don't just want to see the offense blow out the other team. Wouldn't work. Otherwise, what would you do? You just put a T-ball in front of them and just let the guy hit the ball and run the bases. Or you just have people throw passes down the field. It becomes flag football at that point, right? Boring and worthless. So in order to keep parity within the league, that's where it comes back to the idea of rigging these games. And by parity, what I mean, the word might sound a little off, especially if you're listening or you're not seeing it written. There's an undefeated team, like the New York Giants, for example. The Philadelphia Eagles come into MetLife Stadium a couple weeks ago. They should absolutely trounce the Giants, who are on a downward spiral. The Giants win the game. The Eagles are 2 weeks later, they destroy them. That's parity in the NFL, where like a high-level team that's going undefeated loses to this like garbage team who could barely score points the week before.
Yeah.
All of a
Look at the
sudden,
Bills. They just lost to Miami.
That's a perfect recent example as well, right? Miami is in disarray. They start getting rid of players. The team does. They get rid of their general manager. All of a sudden, like the
Complete
coach is on the
debacle.
hot seat. Complete debacle, and they beat one of the best teams in the NFL. But it happens all the time. Like you see it in every sport. You see it all the time. And then if you go back and watch some of those games, and it's like, and the Giants and the Eagles game, I can say that for a fact, there was a lot of calls that went the Giants' way that game that made that game manageable for them. You see this happen a lot. All of a sudden, these phantom calls come in, blame whatever you want. You'll get the coaches that come on. It's like, well, it shouldn't come down to a call. We should have done a better job. That's bullshit. Oh, damn, twice. Mauricio, too. Damn. Got to be careful with that. That's not true. Yeah, me too. I mean, do you get where I'm coming from here? Like you're manufacturing this drama now because now you can make it seem like, oh, you didn't watch this week. That garbage team that you like just made a huge upset. And what happened after the Giants beat the Eagles? My season ticket prices went through the roof. People thought this team's back. We're ready to go. Here we go. LFG. And it's back to the same old nonsense.
And now they don't have a head coach, which is actually a good thing, but
It's a good thing.
I digress. No, but you're right? You need parity in sports, right? Otherwise, it becomes boring. And that's exactly why Major League Baseball went to three wildcard teams to get into the playoffs a few years ago, as opposed to just two, right? And so, there is incentive to create more parity. And what better way to create more parity, especially in a league, and in my opinion, I think NFL is probably the easiest if you really wanted to, than to maybe change some calls, maybe have some stuff go one team's way, or no calls and things of that nature. The no call is probably the easiest one. That is probably the easiest one.
Yeah.
Because it's literally it's nothing, right? You're not asking anybody to do anything. You're just asking them to not do something, right? And as apparent as it might be, you don't even need to explain it at that point because officially nothing happened.
Right.
So I think the no call is the big one.
Do you think that there's still players involved on the NFL side as well?
I don't think from any kind of an official perspective, right? So let's say, and I think there's different ways to look at it, right? Do I think that the NFL officially is fixing some of these games? Maybe. If they are, I don't think that there's necessarily player involvement there. I think that's on the officials. But just like we just saw with Major League Baseball, as well as in NBA over the past couple of weeks, there are outside sources, right? Criminal enterprises, or maybe it's not even a criminal enterprise. Maybe I am the third string quarterback, right? And if I get in, well, maybe I'll fumble this ball, right? Whatever it might be. You get where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the player involvement is more on a personal level, or maybe from some other outside conspirators, rather than an official, league type of conspiracy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, outside of like kickers or quarterbacks, it's really hard for the players, I think, to directly impact it. As like a wide receiver, let's say, you don't necessarily know you're going to get the ball. You might know a little bit of what's going to go into the game plan.
I think running backs are easy. Fumbles.
Running backs are easy for sure. Defensive players are really easy. You can blow spots. You see that happen. I mean, I loved the guy's rookie season, but he's digressed. But Deonta Banks and the New York Giants, I mean, he just 100%. Gave up on. But you see this happen all the time. Like people just give up on plays. Like so, there's options there. I do think from an officiating standpoint, the NFL is the easiest one to do it. I think from a player standpoint, players betting, I think you can look at the NBA or the MLB, and it's a lot easier because it's very individualized, right? The NBA, you're running back and forth. I mean, it's very fast paced. There's only a handful of guys in the court at that point, and you really don't have to rely on them to do anything. You can just blow some things up, which obviously is what happened. The MLB, same kind of thing. Like you don't have to swing on that ball. Like you can really, you can shank a catch. You can overthrow somebody when they're running the bases. I think again, they're not individual sports, but I think your individual performance matters more in those scenarios than it does in like a team sport.
Absolutely.
Like the NFL where everyone has to kind of work together. So, do you think this ever is fixed? Do you think this ever is exposed down to the core?
Nah.
And
never,
is stopped?
Never. And listen, even if it is exposed down to the core, I think, give it some time and it comes right back, right? I think whenever there's money involved, you're going to have people that are either greedy or, hard up for cash for whatever reason. Look, just because some of these people are 100,000 years, I mean, if you're talking about, some jabroni reliever, for the Oakland Athletics, or, you're talking about the third string running back for the Tennessee Titans, it doesn't mean that they can't run into financial issues, right? Just because somebody has more money than the average American doesn't mean that they're smart with their money, and you don't know what's going on in their personal lives. So whenever there is
100%.
money, there's incentive to fix something for personal gain, and I don't think that ever goes away.
You nailed it. And how often do we see people that leave any sort of a professional sport? This was big in the pro wrestling world just a couple days ago, and actually I commented on it, and it got responses from multiple other pro wrestlers, and it's all over pro wrestling news now. That a guy left the company, and they basically raised a GoFundMe for him 2 weeks later. You see it happen all the time. People go broke because there's no spending, there's overspending, they're buying all this thing, they don't really realize what's happening. The gambling stuff doesn't stop either, though. Like you saw this. What was that one? DeAndre Baker, I believe, was a Giants first round pick. I mean, in line to make. He was already making millions, but in line to probably get a good contract if he just played out his first deal, and was getting caught up in some like nonsense, like illegal gambling thing at somebody's house, and there was guns involved and stuff. Like it just got all crazy. Like again, you see this happen all the time. There's LeBron James has been a big one that's been brought up on a lot of these things, right? He's one that's tied to all these guys in the NBA. He's got like an arm's length of reach, right? A few degrees of separation there. It happens all the time, and just because you're making money doesn't mean you don't want to kind of risk a little bit more.
Shohei Ohtani is the
Right.
biggest Major League Baseball player on planet Earth. He's the greatest. I don't even think he's a human. I think he was created in a test tube. The guy's just that good, right? He just signed at the point in time where the whole issue went down with him, and technically it was his interpreter, quote unquote, who was indicted for these, for the gambling charges. But he had just signed a 10-year, $700 million contract at that point
Crazy,
in time, before Juan Soto just signed with my New York Mets last season. That was the largest contract in baseball, right? So just because you have a lot of money, doesn't mean you don't want to play with it.
Yep.
Or
Yep.
maybe for some people it's a problem, right? Whatever it might be. And yes, again, I know Shohei wasn't technically indicted on those charges. It was his interpreter.
Yeah.
I'm calling BS on that. He's MLB's golden child. They couldn't let him go down in flames. The sport would go down in flames. You would lose an entire country's viewership. Japan watches a crap ton of baseball. See that? I said crap instead of the S word.
See?
There you go, Mauricio. You don't have to cut that out.
My
I'm
guy.
getting better over here.
My God.
You're gonna lose an entire country! An entire
Yeah.
country!
Yeah.
So what do?
Yeah.
Sweep it under the rug. They get a patsy. They blame it on him. Bingo, bango, bongo. Everybody's happy.
Man, that sounds like a lot of other topics we've talked about so many times in the past, right? Where they protect the big guy at the top, they get that patsy, and a lot of things get swept under the rug. And it always comes back to money, Mr. Phillips, doesn't it? Whether it's governmental, societal, secret societies, anything in between, or sports. Would love to hear what each and every one of you think. Leave a comment below. If you're on Spotify, especially, we respond to those all the time. Our YouTube folks, you've been slowing it down, but we are responding to you as well on there. Like and subscribe. It does help us out more than anything else. You guys know how it is. Sometimes we get a little shadow ban going on here, and our videos just kind of drop off the face of planet Earth. So the only way you're going to find out about it is like, subscribe, maybe click that little bell. Follow us on all social media channels, cocktailsconspiracies.com. We'll get you connected there. Mr. Phillips, any parting words?
Let's go Mets. We're talking sports. Let's go Mets, baby. 2026.
It's probably the only
Deuces.
time we're going to have this show that I think that's an acceptable way for him to finish, was with that. Until next time, everybody, my drink is tapped. Raise your glass to mysteries. Another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. We'll see you again next time. Is your website still stuck in 2009 or worse, built by your cousin's friend who kind of knows WordPress,
No! God, please, no!
it's time for an upgrade. At sfx.com, we specialize in custom web design, SEO, and full-service IT solutions tailored for small businesses that are ready to scale. Whether you're just starting out or reinventing your brand, the team at sfx.com brings strategy, style, and serious tech skills to every project. Visit s-fx.com today, where small businesses get big solutions.
Visit s-f